Welcome everyone and welcome to our panelists. We're here today to talk about how to get ahead in the events industry, how to start out in it and how to move up in it. We're here with the lovely Sam Trevena, who's the co-founder and COO of Goose, Charlotte Butte, who is the senior project coordinator at Strata, and Laura Capel-Abro, who is the founder of Stress Matters and No More Ifs and Buts. We will be getting full intros from all of them in a moment, but just a couple of admin things first. You should be able to see a little chat on the right-hand side of your screen. If you've got any questions for us throughout, just do feel free to type them into the chat and we'll feed them into the conversation. But yeah, we're also going to be recording this session as well, so you'll be able to catch up on anything that you've missed. It'll be on our video hub as a sort of evergreen resource for you. So I'm going to start by asking each of our panelists to introduce themselves. So please could you tell us where you are now and a little bit about your journey into the industry so far. Charlotte, perhaps we can start with you, please.
Of course. Hello, everyone. My name's Charlotte. So in 2021, I graduated from the University of Hertfordshire and I did a degree in events management. And the third year of that degree was to go on a placement year. And I did that at my current agency, which is Strata, full name Strata Creative Communications. And we are a kind of full brand experience agency based in London and Northamptonshire. So I did a 8-month placement year during my third year of university, went back for my final year and have been back at Strata permanently for just over 3 years now. So I've been with the company kind of best part of 4 years in total. But yeah, that's me.
Lovely, thank you so much. If we could go to Sam now, please. If you could tell us a bit about where you are now and your journey into the industry so far.
Hello, everybody. I'm Sam Trevena. I am one of the co-founders of Goose Live Events. We are celebrating 20 years in the events industry this year, but I actually started when I was 19 as an office junior and have literally worked my way up through 2 agencies. The first agency I was with for 10 years, and that was bought out. And then a few of us left and set up Goose. And here we are 20 years on, still doing fabulous events for clients and large scale public events.
Amazing, thank you so much. And Laura, if we could go to you next, a little bit about where you are now and your journey into the industry.
Of course. So I started off working event agency side, worked my way up through various agencies and became managing director at an agency. And then I've actually kind of half left the industry now. So 8 years ago, I left organising events to start working on supporting people who work in the events industry. So retrained, became a coach, set up a company called No More Ifs or Buts. A few years later, also set up a company called Stress Matters. And so I now focus my work on helping those in the events industry, working on mental health and wellbeing development, but also apprenticeships in the industry as well. So very much still part of the industry, but not actually working in the industry, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Laura. So we're going to first start talking about networking, which some people love and it comes very naturally, and some people it puts the fear of God into them. So Sam, if I could come to you first, could you talk a little bit about why networking is important and why it can be useful and maybe what it can do for you as you're kind of starting out in your career or hoping to move up and around in your career?
Well, I was actually quite late to networking, and I've only really been doing it for the last 8 to 10 years, which isn't a lot given how long I've been in the industry for. But what I will say is it's invaluable. It gives you confidence once you get over that fear of walking in that room for the first time, finding someone to talk to, people that you build connections with across different sectors, whether they're from venues or other agencies or suppliers. You never know when you'll need that person, or they might need you or think of you. So it gives you so many skills. But the biggest thing I've learned is it gives you a different community. And through my networking, I'm now part of smaller support groups, and like there's female agency leaders, there's other groups that you can be part of and that you can tap into and say, can anyone recommend this? Or what they'll mention your name in a room when you're not there. It's a godsend. It really is. But I would say I didn't like doing it. Most of my junior staff don't like doing it. So I always say to them, come with me. Let me take you into the room and introduce you to someone and start you off. So that's what my recommendation would be. Go with someone that's part of your agency or part of your team or someone that you know, going in, walk in that room and be brave and just have that first conversation.
Thank you so much, Sam. That's really great advice. Charlotte, can I come to you on the same question? Why is networking important? How do you feel about it? What can it do for you? Any thoughts around that?
Yeah, of course. So similarly to Sam, not a big fan at first because it is definitely really scary. It is an uncomfortable situation to put yourself in, but kind of touching on what Sam said, it really is invaluable in terms of getting your name out there. You never know when you're going to need that contact. So, for example, I recently really needed to find a freelance show caller because all of my usual contacts were unavailable. And so I've ended up having to use a show caller that I've never used or worked with before, but I've based my selection of them based on what other people have told me about them. So I'm much more comfortable working with this new person I've never met before because I know that, 3 of my other colleagues have worked with them. They've given me their name, they've endorsed them. So that immediately put me at ease that, okay, people know this person, they're a safe pair of hands. I'm going to give them a go. And then that's an extra person that I can then add to my network, and I'm an extra person for their network as well. So next time that they might need, an associate producer, they might think of my name, for example. So it really is great to get your name out there. And it's also good for junior positions if you're looking for an internship or experience, like an entry-level role. Just getting your name out there and telling people that you're looking for that experience. If then someone else that they're having a conversation says like, oh, we're going to start an intern program, we really need someone, then your name might get mentioned, and then you can share that contact and really kind of get yourself into some new opportunities that way. So even though it's uncomfortable for pretty much everyone at one point. So it's definitely a good space to be vulnerable in, and definitely worth doing and pushing yourself out of your comfort zone.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. All very important points there, and I think absolutely it's not always comfortable, but it is worth doing. And so maybe Laura, I'll come to you a little bit on that. Do you have any sort of tips for networking, what to do, what not to do, and approaching it, especially if you're someone who potentially struggles with anxiety or who has anxiety around going into those sorts of spaces? Do you have any tips for sort of navigating that?
Yeah, it's a couple of different options. I think quite often we assume networking has to be kind of face-to-face networking events, but I think there's so many opportunities to network, i.e. meet people in different environments. So that can be at an event maybe you're actually involved in already. Maybe it's through an online forum such as workshops and webinars and things like that. So I think trying to think about what area will be more comfortable for you, fully appreciating, as the others have said, that networking is uncomfortable, but thinking about how maybe you might find it a more appealing idea. So it doesn't all have to be done in the same way. I think quite often we think it has to be done by these kind of extrovert personalities that go out and they kind of have these big personalities and they do all these kind of big conversations and feel comfortable walking in a room, but that doesn't need to be the case. You can be yourself. You just need to find the right environment for yourself. But in terms of the anxiety piece, I think it is a real tricky area. And of course, depending on what you're comfortable with and what you're not comfortable with and the environment, it's about kind of what I would say, what's the kind of the most comfortable, uncomfortable thing. So what's the thing that is just a step up from normally? So maybe you've never been to a networking event before. So actually registering and walking in the door is the most tolerable thing you can do. And maybe that's all you do on the first time you ever go to a networking event, and you don't talk to anybody and you just observe. And then it's giving yourself that challenge of the next time, how can you push yourself that little bit further? So you're maybe still uncomfortable, but you're not quite as uncomfortable. And another kind of final, I suppose, more practical tip, which is maybe an unpopular opinion, is I think it's much easier to do good networking when you go on your own. It's a lot less comfortable, but you then kind of have to talk to other people. So I think trying to put yourself in that position where you don't just go and speak to all the people you already know, that's another way of doing it as well.
Thank you so much, Laura. Some brilliant advice there. We're going to talk now a little bit about it, showcasing yourself, and that can happen in person at a networking event or online, as Laura mentioned. And that's kind of where I'd like to start, is a little bit around what advice do you guys have for people in terms of showcasing themselves, both online and on paper? So maybe that's via a CV, Maybe that's through a cover letter, maybe that's through your LinkedIn profile. What are the ways that, if for example, you are looking to employ someone, what is going to impress you, whether that's someone's online presence or whether that is the kind of physical submissions that they send in. Sam, perhaps we can start with you there. What might impress you in terms of that sort of roster of things?
Well, so as you say, two sides of that. LinkedIn is really powerful now. If you've been to an event or you've got something to say, it's really worth putting your opinion out there in a thoughtful and not too out there way. But it really makes you kind of have an opinion. People will come to you, they might comment on it, might engage in a conversation. It's also a chance to showcase some of the work you're doing. You always have to remember whether you've got permission to talk about that work publicly. But LinkedIn is powerful, and even if it's just starting to comment on other people's threads or posts as well, if it's relevant, you can tiptoe in and sort of build your voice up that way. When it comes to CVs, what I would really like to see is something that stands out away from your standard A4 typical looking one that could have been written in any time in the last 20 years. There's lots of tools, whether it's Canva or PowerPoint, however you want to do it, but really show your personality a bit more on that CV. You want to talk about what you did on an event, not just the event that you've worked on. Or if you've got passions, highlight them, because it highlights other skills that are transferable. So if you love playing netball, say it. It's a team player, it's skills, it's, all of those things which people look at as soft skills that are different. So I'd certainly be mindful about not just saying what you've done, but what your actual involvement was. I often have to drill down in interviews with people to say, but what did you do on it? What was your role? So take the initiative to really explain any key highlights from if you've worked on an event. So I know we'll come on to talk about if you haven't and how you get your foot in the door, but it's really important to get across, not just say the event you've done, but what was your role? What difference did it make?
Thank you so much, Sam. Laura, perhaps I could come to you on the same sort of question, with your managing director hat on. What was it that kind of impressed you, stood out to you, when you were looking for candidates, whether that was online or via their CVs and cover letters?
So as with Sam, it's really tricky thinking about CVs, because when I recruit now, the CVs are quite often very similar to what they were 20 years ago, to Sam's point. I'm a massive fan of video. I think there's a huge part of this industry that is about your personality and your ability to communicate and listen. And I think you can really demonstrate that if you do something like a video submission as well. So it's also, many companies nowadays, I think, are being a little bit more inclusive, that not everybody is as comfortable putting together written documentation. And so quite often you can ask businesses to say, would you be comfortable if I submitted a video overview of me? And as to Sam's point about being able to then show a little bit more of your personality, and maybe you feel more comfortable talking about things in a video than maybe writing things. So I think, again, always try and think about what works for you and shows you off in the best light. And then don't be afraid to ask the potential employer if it's okay, if that's the way that you interact with them, rather than maybe what had been pre-prescribed. They may well say no, of course, it's in their right to say no, but I'm a big fan of asking and then finding out whether or not that's an option, rather than assuming that it's not.
Thank you. Absolutely. That's great advice. So once you've got into the room, you're in that audition room, Charlotte, perhaps I could come to you. Do you have any tips on, once you're in the room, what can you do to sort of showcase yourself well to your potential employer, to present yourself? Perhaps that's in a networking room, perhaps that's in an interview room. Do you have any tips for that sort of face-to-face showcasing and presenting yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So on a couple of networking events that I've gone to, there was actually a speaker first before the networking happened who actually gave you some tips for networking or / just in-person interactions. And there's the kind of classic things like try and remember the person's name that you're speaking to, repeat it back to them a few times during the conversation to kind of get it in your mind, so that when you walk away you can say, thank you so much, name, lovely to meet you, etc. Just kind of get in that person's mind as this person has taken the time to listen to me and they kind of understand me. There was another quite quirky tip, which was about matching blink rates with someone, which I think is just an extra level of complexity that kind of don't need to worry about. But I'd say kind of in an interview situation or also networking, I've always tried to be as honest and transparent as possible. There's kind of a much bigger acceptance of being almost vulnerable in those sorts of situations now, being honest. Obviously, you want to sell yourself, you want to big yourself up because you want to showcase the best skills that you've got, but it's always okay to be honest and say, look, these are my current strengths. I know I've got some gaps in, X, Y, and Z, which are on the job description, but there's no point going for a job if you're fully qualified. There always needs to be room for kind of growth and improvement. And as long as you show that you're very willing to work on those things, you could even have a plan in place, such as, I know that you do this job every year. That would develop the skills that I've got gaps in. So I'd love to shadow someone and kind of learn all about it and ask questions. Just be really eager to learn, because that's the biggest thing that you can do in this industry. It's not, obviously I did an events management degree, but going into the industry is a completely different ball game. That's when you actually learn everything. So, just being honest and really getting across that you're eager to learn, I would say, is something that would always go down well in an interview. But remember to sell yourself, and don't sell yourself short either, because I think a lot of people are avid in criticising themselves too much these days.
Absolutely. And I think that goes back to Sam's point of, we're often quite good at going, we did this. And actually it's about having to go, I did this. I was the person that did that. And that not feeling like you're sort of boasting. Actually, that's a space where you can talk about, I did this really well, rather than talking about, we did this, which is a lovely way to approach lots of things. But for this sort of setting, you need to think about what your part was and what you offered, which was plenty, I'm sure. We've talked a little bit about sort of anxiety around all of these things, and how to cope with that. But we wanted to sort of go into well-being now. And so, Laura, if I can come to you, applying for jobs, entering new work environments, all of this can be quite stressful. How can you look after your mental health, both in when you're applying for those jobs? So potentially you might be dealing with rejection, you're putting yourself out there a lot. You might be going in for interviews, which might feel quite anxiety inducing. And then also kind of when you've got to the other side of that and you're starting in those new roles, do you have any advice for, navigating that new environment and asking for what you need in it? So sort of two questions there, but it'd be great if you could speak to both.
Little question there. You're right, it can be a really anxiety inducing time, and I think being really honest with yourself about, as I said before, what you're comfortable with and what you're not comfortable with. So I think one of the things that I think can work really well is when you kind of approach going for jobs, or kind of that application process as a job in itself. So you give yourself certain hours a day that you're working on applying for jobs, and others you're not. So actually build in that self-care time throughout the day. So rather than I've spent 12 hours today applying for jobs online, actually say, no, I'm going to do it for 2 hours or an hour even. I'm going to have a break. I'm going to do something good for my mental health or well-being, and all that might be taking a walk or chatting to a friend on the phone, whatever it might be, to then go back into it with that rejuvenated energy. I think what can happen when we're applying for job after job after job is that actually the applications become less good throughout the time, because actually our energy levels aren't as good. So we need to put our well-being first, because if you manage to get through to interview stage, you've got to be able to put your best face forward, as Charlotte was saying. So actually we want to be in a position where we're coming across really well, and we can't do that if we're tired and we're stressed. So there's kind of looking after yourself in that application process up to interview. Then when it comes to interview, it can be really nerve-wracking. The first time you're meeting a company, you might be super excited about the idea of working there, and so it becomes really high pressure. And there's lots of things that we can do as individuals, and everybody has the kind of the thing that works better for them. But one thing that works really well for me when I'm going up on maybe onto stage or talking to somebody that I'm a bit nervous about, is really focusing on my breathing and just giving myself maybe 30 seconds before I walk into that room or on the stage or whatever it might be, just of doing some real kind of grounding breathing, so that actually that kind of heart pace and that kind of high pace heart rate, or the butterflies in the tummy, whatever it might be, can just dissipate a little bit. It's actually, it's okay to be a little bit anxious about something. That's completely normal. And it's about giving yourself that just a little bit of a grounding moment to say, okay, I'm going to do my best, and that's all I can do. And I'm a big believer of the word yet. So you might not have got the job yet, you might not have found your next place yet, but it will happen at some point. And the more you can look after your own well-being and your mental health in that process, the much greater chance it is of happening sooner. So hopefully that answered most of the parts of that question. In terms of when you're there, and of course you've got the job, again, as Charlotte was saying, being really honest and vulnerable, and you can say to the recruiter, oh, I'm a bit nervous about my first day, have you got any recommendations? And quite often people will say, oh, well, I'll come and meet you at the front door, or here's a pack of things for you to read and information before. Sometimes there's the opportunity to meet the team, the wider team, before your first day, for example. So again, think about what might make it more comfortable for you. If you're a little bit nervous about going to the office, is there a way of maybe finding out a bit more information about the layout of the office before you go, so you don't have to worry about that thing as well? So thinking about the things that you might be nervous about, and where possible, trying to ask for extra information on that, ask for a little bit more support in terms of on your first day or in that first week, for example, can be really beneficial. So I think there's nothing wrong with asking. As I've said, always ask. It can say no, of course, but actually, if you know that just having that one person meet you at the door might make you feel far more comfortable when you walking into an office than just having to announce yourself when you walk in, then ask for it. And then I'm sure that's the kind of thing that most people would be able to accommodate.
Absolutely. And I do think that offices are changing in that sense as well, where actually people are a lot more open to going, how do you work best? What do you need to work at your best? Is it to be in a quieter space? Is it to have an assigned desk? So I think there is definitely capacity to speak to you'll probably have a line manager or something like that you can speak to them, and you can say, this is how I would work best, this is what would help me, and they should listen to you, and that should be a part of that sort of process of starting a job, is because they want to get that your best out of you, and so it's in their interest as well to listen to what you need, and to make sure that you're comfortable, and to make sure that your needs are being met in this new space. So yes, something that is probably a reality when you're applying for jobs is dealing with rejection. And so I just wondered, perhaps if I could go to Charlotte, do you have any tips on dealing with rejection when you're applying for jobs, when you're in that process?
Mm-hmm. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is to have ice cream on standby when you are waiting to hear whether you've got a job, because I know that did happen to me a few years ago when I was applying for a placement, and I was waiting. I was really excited about the opportunity, and unfortunately it wasn't to be. And I just remember being really, really upset, because in that moment I couldn't think past that thing that had happened. I couldn't imagine finding something else that I was just as excited about and being successful in it. But I think that obviously you need to give yourself time to process that feeling. You can either just kind of chuck it to the side and move straight on, or you can let yourself kind of process it and then move on, whatever kind of works best for you. But kind of all the classic cliches kind of helped me through those times, which was that rejection is actually redirection. It's not a no, it's a not this and not yet, like Laura said. And obviously the classic, when one door closes, another door opens, and everything happens for a reason, which is they always make sense in hindsight when you're then in that position that you've finally secured. But in that moment, I can absolutely appreciate that all of those cliches don't help at all, and you just want to be in that moment where you want to be. So in terms of dealing with that, it would be having maybe a good support network if you can, whether that's a family or a friend that you can talk to about, or potentially if you're at university, talking to your tutor, because they usually have a lot of resources about kind of job hunting, etc. Trying to think if there's any other tips that I can think of off the top of my head. I suppose a lot of them do relate back to kind of Laura's wellbeing points, about kind of, looking after yourself, speaking to people. But yeah, I would say that it's obviously easier said in hindsight, but you just have to keep pushing. Like Laura said, something will happen for you. So I hope that somewhat helps.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Charlotte. And actually, challenges like that are going to, when you're starting out, it's often rejection, but there's challenges that are going to sort of keep coming up throughout your career. So Sam, do you have any advice on kind of generally dealing with adversity, dealing with challenges? Are there kind of, is there a method that you use when something is a bit difficult, stressful, etc.? What do you do to move yourself forwards?
I'm not sure I've got a method, but I would say, and to Charlotte's follow on from what she was saying, ask for feedback if you can, because it will help signpost you into either what did work or didn't work, or just rationale behind decision making, because sometimes you get into your own head and overthink things, and actually it might be a completely different perspective that might explain why something hasn't happened. I remember before I got my job in the first agency, I was unemployed, and I'd applied for a job at British Airways, and I was devastated not to get it. And then a week later, I was asked for interview, which turned out to be an event agency, which has got me now here. So you just never know which path you're going to end up going down. Adversity is a tricky one because it covers so many aspects. Events are planned to go well, but they don't always. So it might be an issue with deadlines or clients, or it could be anything to do with teamwork. There's so many reasons why you might end up in a situation that doesn't feel cool. But the first thing, and it's a bit of a thing we always say at Goose, particularly recently, was like the first rule number one of event planning is don't panic, don't flap. Just maybe to Laura's point about your breath, calm your breath, think, then go on, pause, don't overthink things. And that will help guide you first, certainly through your initial first steps through the next phase of what you need to do. It's such a broad topic to answer, but I would certainly say just try and calm first and then respond rather than reacting, would be my advice.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sam. We're going to talk now a little bit about kind of starting out and how you do that and how you get those first roles. So Sam, I'm actually going to come back to you with the question of, for those looking to get a foot in the door in the industry, where should they be looking for opportunities, and how can they be gaining the kind of experience that they can put on their CV? So, if they're not immediately employed, if they don't have that first job to put on their CV, how can you be sort of bulking that up? And where should they be looking for job opportunities?
So there's a lot more opportunities to get into events. I feel you've got a whole raft of event degrees which have only really just got better over the last 10 years or so. But if university isn't for you, talk to your friends, talk to your network, talk to the people you know personally. We've got situations where probably a quarter of our staff at one point all came through personal connections, and they were a friend of a friend that recommended somebody that came for interview, and this year we've ended up employing somebody's indirect contact that is now on an event apprenticeship because she realised that actually university wasn't for her, but she knew she wanted to work in events. So I said to her, write to me, tell me what you want to do. So some of it goes back to the networking of building your network, and it doesn't have to be industry specific. It could just be your peer group or your parents' peer groups, and ask people, talk to them about what you want to do. The other thought I've had more recently is there's a lot of brand ambassador agencies out there who place staff into events for short-term support. That's another place to start if you're not working and you want to get exposed into the whole different types of events. Maybe go sign up with some of those agencies and pick up some of the work across summers or evenings, because that again builds your experience in different ways and you see a completely different side of it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I think it's a great way to, there's potentially opportunities to work at everything from, dining events to exhibitions to corporate events. So it's also a great way to find out what the breadth of the industry is and go, this feels like a really exciting event that maybe I'd want to be organising and be on that side of.
Yeah. Or didn't know that kind of event existed. Yeah.
Exactly. Now I wanted to ask about sort of kind of following on from that. How do you know where to start? How do you find your place in the industry? So maybe Charlotte, I can go to you next. How do you know where to start and how do you find your place?
So like a lot of people on my university course, we had all been interested in events from a festival point of view. I feel like when you're quite young, the corporate world is never really that visible because you just don't get involved in it unless you happen to, have a personal connection or something like that. So I'd actually gone to V Festival in 2016 and kind of just noticed all of this advertising and sponsorship and thought, I wonder how that's got there. And that kind of got me thinking. And I was at that stage where I was looking at university courses. So then I had a little look into events management. So I actually kind of started looking from one particular perspective, and I've ended up, you know, in ultra corporate, so completely different, because that door was never even an opportunity or possibility for me because it wasn't in my mind. So I'd say just actually, if you're thinking about going into the events industry, just attend some events, just all different ones. There's like free wedding fairs that you can go to. I went to a few of those. You might have to pretend to be a bride, but that's okay. Or you can just, there's lots of events at the Excel in London about different topics, either event specific topics, or if you're already working in a different industry, for example, there might be an industry event for your industry that you could attend and just kind of get exposure to the events world. And something will catch your eye, or will gravitate towards something. And once you pursue it, you might then end up getting pulled in another direction like I did. But that's, in my case, it was a good thing. And obviously what's meant to be is meant to be. And you can never really get too much exposure. Kind of all sectors are linked. And I find a lot of people that I've met in the industry have started in one place and they've moved all the way around. They've either done a full circle or they're just on the other end of the spectrum. But I would say that volunteering is always a good thing to do as well. Kind of to Sam's point, that kind of staffing agency is a really, really good place. But when I was at university, I did a lot of volunteering at any kind of free local events in the area where my uni was based. So I volunteered at a Christmas fair, which was great. And I volunteered at some golfing events, just being a steward, for example, at the information desk, and kind of building those connections with those organisers then meant that when they were doing another event, they would get in touch with me and say, oh, we're looking for more staff if you wanted to come along. So again, everything's kind of linked. That then fed into the networking piece. So all I can say is to just have a look around. And if you start in something, if you started in festivals, for example, and you felt like you didn't like it, you've still gained some transferable skills that will apply to any other sector. So it's always definitely worth just having a look and broadening your horizons as much as possible. And at university, for example, is a great place to do that because you've got tutors with connections and lots of local events going around. But if you're not at university, there's still just events everywhere. So just having a look at what local businesses are up to would be a great place to start.
Completely. Thank you so much. And I think it was Sam that mentioned the event apprenticeship scheme, which is something that EVCOM has been sort of part of pushing forwards as well. So I definitely recommend taking a look at that if uni's not what you want to do, but event apprenticeships do appeal to you. That's definitely worth investigating. Laura, do you have any thoughts on sort of, finding your place in the industry and knowing where to look and how to get there?
Mention apprenticeship because I was like, apprenticeships is another option for those of us that are maybe less keen on uni. So yeah, definitely look at apprenticeships, and very happy for anybody that might be interested in that to connect with me and do some good networking, and I can maybe put you in contact with some people that are looking for apprentices. But in terms of thinking about finding your place in the industry, I think don't rush it. To Charlotte's point, actually you can move around the industry, and that's what's so amazing about it. If I think back to when I started in events, I started off with experiential. So the idea of being a brand ambassador, I didn't know at the time, and I totally wish that's one of the routes I'd taken into the industry, to the others' points. But I started off in experiential, then moved into festivals, then moved into corporate, and now work a lot with exhibition companies. So you can move around the industry. And so I don't think you need to put pressure on yourself to find your place. Let that be your career. Let actually trying out different parts of the industry be part of your career itself anyway. I think what's really important is to focus on your, what I'd refer to as kind of mindset about it. And I think it was Sam maybe that mentioned earlier about going in and showing
I think we might just have lost Laura. Sam and Charlotte, can you hear me? Excellent. Okay, I think we've just lost Laura briefly, but hopefully she will rejoin. And in the middle of some wonderful, wonderful thoughts, unfortunately, but we'll keep going without her. So we're going to talk for this sort of last section. And if you do have any questions, do feel free to pop them in the chat. But we're going to talk in this last section about moving up. So, you know, maybe you're in your first role, your second role, your fourth role, wherever you are. Moving to the next stage and moving up in that career can be a difficult thing to approach or something to navigate. So perhaps, Sam, we can start with you. For those wanting to make the next step in their career, what should they be thinking about kind of ahead of that? How much planning goes into that? Should you be sort of working on your development, skill sets, etc.? Do you have any advice around that and around how planned it needs to be and what you need to be thinking about if that's something that is on your trajectory?
You know, as event planners, I would say don't always over plan it, and by all means set your goals, but be curious, be patient. One of the things, particularly in agency life, is I've always advocated for try every role before you think you're leaping. One event doesn't just make you an event manager. You've got to really take your time to learn all aspects. You might not love registration, but you've got to know how to do it. And the only way you'll know how to do it is by doing it. Production might interest you, or client management. There's so many aspects of our industry. So I would say be patient, but be focused on where you want to get to and why you want to get to there as well. Some people, it's important to have a title. Others, it's a role, and there's a nuance in the difference of that. So it's a tricky one because it depends which way you're building your path through the industry. But certainly don't worry if you don't feel your pace is quickening, that you haven't got that promotion in a year or 18 months. It's the experience. So long as you're keeping building that will give you the options that give you your next step.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And Charlotte, could you talk a little bit about, that process of developing your skill sets as you're in your first role or two, and how you do that, how you work towards that?
Yeah, so this is actually the process that I'm currently finding myself in at the moment. So I started as a live events intern during my placement, and then I came back as a project coordinator, and then for kind of the last year and a half I've been a senior project coordinator. I'm now really trying to push myself into that associate producer role. And it can be a challenge, absolutely. So thank you, Sam, for the advice. I've made a couple of notes. But from my side, I request job descriptions for the job that I'm looking to go to, whether that's the immediate job that I'm looking for, or if I have a plan, you know, in however many years' time I want to be an executive producer, I'll get those job descriptions for those next roles up so that I can actually highlight, okay, what can I do? That gives me a bit of a confidence boost. And what can't I currently do yet, as Laura says, because you will absolutely be able to do it. And having those really clear definitions of areas that you can improve in is really handy, which you can then go to your line manager with and actually set out a bit of a development plan, which is what I'm currently working on at the moment. So I can say, okay, I can see on the events tracker that in 3 months we've got this conference coming up, and I really want to, you know, be able to run rehearsals. I really want to write a technical running order. So can I be on that? And even if I do it myself or I shadow someone and then kind of, you know, get feedback, that's a really clear way to bridge that skills gap. And then if you kind of I've got a bit of a Excel tracker of all the events that I have done, that I've worked on, and much to our point earlier, I've written down, you know, what have I actually done in that role, and I'll make a note of the gaps of the skills rather that I demonstrated in that job, any good feedback, any constructive feedback, so that I've got a really clear log of, okay, this is what I need to work on. And when I've kind of then put that Excel in front of a line manager, for example, that's kind of written evidence of, okay, you've earned this promotion, so here you go, you can tick off, you know, 60% of the job description, for example, because like I said earlier, you shouldn't be, you know, 100% qualified for a role, because you're going to find it too easy. Like, there needs to be a challenge. So just actually having a bit of a plan. But Sam's comments are really helpful for me, because I do put a lot of pressure on myself to do stuff in a certain time scale. I'm like, well, by January I need to be an associate producer, otherwise, you know, I'm doomed. But that's just so not the case, because the industry really is so peaks and troughs. if the project isn't there in existence within my agency for me to bridge those skills, then obviously I can't do it. And that's just going to set me up to make me feel like I failed when I absolutely haven't, because everyone's pathways are different. I'll see other people progressing at a certain rate to me, and it's kind of comparison I've really found is the thief of joy lately. And so I just kind of need to focus on myself, obviously believe in the feedback that I'm receiving, ask for feedback most importantly, and put a plan in place on how you're going to action those constructive pieces that you were given.
Thanks so much, Charlotte. So much brilliant advice there, I think. Oh, Sam, a hand up from Sam. Yes, do feel free to follow on.
I just wanted to follow up because I think Charlotte's been brilliant today, but also writing that stuff down does help. And one thing I didn't mention earlier was about mentoring schemes within the industry. And one that I've been part of is Elevate, which has been brilliant. And it's a 6-month mentoring scheme. And I was helping a project manager or coordinator get, her goal was to get to project manager. And exactly that was writing down the work she'd done over that time so that she could look back and reflect, but also have the confidence that she was making progress. So to Charlotte's point, it's really useful to keep that journal of all your achievements. So yeah, definitely.
Thank you so much both. And I think that ties into that sort of confidence, mental health side of things. So perhaps Laura, we could come to you last. So if you've got any thoughts on what people should be thinking about as they're trying to make that next step in their career and develop those skill sets, and how to navigate that potential pressure and the feeling of where you should be and where you are, if you've got any thoughts.
So I think just following on with Charlotte's point about feedback, I think asking for feedback can be really uncomfortable, but is so important, and not just waiting for a review cycle, actually getting to the end of an event or even in the middle of it and asking not only your manager, but, you know, if appropriate, colleagues and stakeholders from different departments, or even clients and suppliers, depending on the environment, is really useful. And being honest and saying, I want to get better at my job. What else do you think I could be doing, or what do you think I can focus on? Because obviously, if you're just asking your manager for feedback, they're going to have one opinion, but other people will see different sides of you. So I think it's really important to get that well kind of rounded feedback. But in terms of kind of managing your own mental health and kind of thinking about your resilience in that kind of situation, thinking about that ability to go back to that word, you're going to be learning. I'm still learning. I'm, in my 40s, I've been doing this for a long time, and I'm constantly learning, and that's what makes it really exciting. And of course, there's those frustrating moments of, I wish I could be able to do that, or I want to be able to do it and I can't quite do it, or I've not had that opportunity because that event hasn't been in our business this year, to give some of those previous examples. I think it's about remembering that there's always room for improvement, and there's always an opportunity to learn, and seeing that as a positive can really change the way you see things. So there's a guy called Ryan Holiday, an author, who writes a book called Obstacle is the Way, and it very much positions that actually when you might think something's gone wrong, but actually if it's an opportunity to then learn something, to then do something different, then maybe that's the opportunity for you. That actually, rather than looking at it, and I know it's easy to say, but you can kind of train your brain to think about things, to say, well, actually, I get to do this now. And one of the things that I always say in every first coaching session that I ever run is we ban the word should. You should do anything? Well, no. Who says you should? Why should you be in this role by this point in time? I get to, I want to, or I can do are the kind of the 3 words that we encourage people to use. And actually, my career path's probably not not the traditional career path, and I don't think I know anybody that is. So every kind of vision we might have of it following a certain path, if you can be open to the fact that the path is going to be whatever the path is going to be, and as long as you're going into it with a growth mindset and this real kind of eagerness to learn, and you can show that to the people that you're working with or want to work with, that's the thing that will actually remind you that you're always going to be benefiting. So it's much easier to feel positive and optimistic and confident about things if you're taking as much of it from even if it's rejection, taking the positive and what's my learning opportunity from it, then you're always progressing and going forward. And where people tend to get frustrated and stuck, it's when they feel like they're not moving forward. So actually, if you're always looking for that ability to take on extra feedback, ability to learn more, whatever it might be, it can help you feel like you're always developing, and therefore then we feel more in control of everything that's in front of us.
Brilliant. Thank you so much to all of you for so much absolutely insightful advice and tips for people who are both starting out in the industry and trying to make that next step wherever they are. I think all of you have brought so much compassion and care and wonderful advice to the session. So I really, really appreciate you all joining us and spending this time with us. And thank you to everyone who is listening and to everyone who is listening to this on demand as well. Yeah, as I said, we'll be putting this on our Video Hub as an evergreen resource, so you can sort of catch up, rewatch anytime, etc. If you're not already an EVCOM Next Gen member and you are between the ages of 18 to 25, that is something I'd recommend considering. It's a free membership to EVCOM that just involves being a bit closer to our community, getting some free tickets to events, so you can do some of that networking and getting sort of opportunities and resources sent to you in a curated newsletter. It also involves you having access to a scheme that we run called Have a Virtual Coffee With, where we will pair you up with someone in the industry who's a bit further on, and it's just the chance to have kind of a half-hour Zoom call or phone call and ask them your questions and say to them, yeah, this is what I'm feeling insecure about, this is what my CV is looking like and it's not working, why not, etc. So it's just a chance to actually have a conversation with someone. So I definitely recommend checking out those things along with all of the wonderful other resources and schemes that our panelists have mentioned today. But that is all for now. So just want to say again, a huge thank you to everyone for joining us and have a lovely rest of your evenings. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.